Welcome to EPG Pathshala. Hi students and viewers. I am Dr. Alamelu Mangai, Assistant Professor from the PG and Research Department of Home Science, Bharathasan Government College for Women, Puducherry. Let me start this module by putting a question in front of you. Have you ever been a decision maker? For sure, you would have been in your lifetime. Either in your family or in your workplace, and even sometimes you have the right to take the right decision during some personal occasions too. Similarly, in food service organizations also, as you know very well that it has nearly 7 functional departments. All the managers in all these 7 functional departments is kept on continuous decision making process, whether it is a planning department or in the front office. The managers are involved in the process of decision making every step in the day-to-day functioning of the organization. Appropriate decision making for the appropriate situation will make you a successful leader. As you also know, the decision making involves not only in the planning, as I said earlier, but also in the formulation of policies, in putting forth certain strategies, sometimes in firing your employees, in their transfers, as well in the performance appraisal, you need to take a proper decision. In this module, you are going to learn about the definition of decision making, the concept of decision making, the different types of the decision making process, the different steps or the stages involved in the process of decision making, as well the techniques that you need to adopt in the food service organization so as to take a best alternatives that will suit the present situation. Let me start first with the definition. There are many definitions given by many scientists and the management people. According to George R. Terry, decision making is a selecting of an alternative from 2 or more alternatives to determine an opinion or a course of action. This process involves understanding the problem, collection of information, developing and evaluating alternatives, choice of a solution, and its evaluation. With many definitions, I could reveal certain characteristics of the decision making. The decision making is goal-oriented activity and can be considered good or bad only in relation to specific goal that is aimed by the organization. It is a process of selection from the alternative courses of action. It is a conscious and a human process. The choices should be free so that you can choose the alternatives without any external imposed coercion. Decision making involves commitment in the face of uncertainty, and the final result is possible and the course of action might be uncertain. It involves a careful thinking and deliberation, analysis and verification. It also requires resolution of conflict. Decision making can be considered both as an art and as a science. It contains both conscious and unconscious aspects. It is a science so far as deductive reasoning is concerned. It might be an art in the sense that it involves judgment and intuition of the decision maker. Decision making can be both positive and negative, and it involves a time dimension and a time lag. Sometimes decision making is a situation. A manager might take one decision under particular circumstances and another in a different situation. So, the decision making is a continuous process, and a manager has to continuously take a decision of one type of another. Now, you need to learn about the different types of decision making so that you will know which type of decision will enable you to take an appropriate decision. the first one is routine and strategic decisions. The routine, which is also called as tactical decision, is made repetitively following certain established rules, procedures, and policies. They require collection of new data and confer with the people, and it cannot be taken without much deliberation. Though it is a complicated, the decision remains dimensional. This type of decision can be taken by the managers at middle and lower level, and it does not need much effort. Whereas the strategic decision, which is called as basic decision, are taken generally by the top level management, and the middle level management can remain very important. The higher the level of manager, the more strategic decision he is required to take. The strategic decisions relate to policy matter and also require a thorough fact finding and analysis of possible alternative. Identifying the exact problem is necessary by the manager, and they become too serious about the decision as these decisions might influence the lower level of management. The next type is policy and operating decisions. Policy decisions are always taken by the top level of the management and is of vital importance, whereas the operating decisions are taken by the lower level of management and it is put into action according to the policy decision. For instance, the bonus issue is a policy matter which is decided by the top management, and calculation of bonus is an operating decision which is taken by the lower level to execute that policy decision. The third type of decision making is organizational and personal decisions. Organizational decisions are those which a manager takes in his official capacity where it can be delegated, but the personal decision relate to manager as an individual and not as a member of organization, and it cannot be delegated. The fourth type of decision is programmed and non-programmed decisions. The programmed decisions are a routine and repetitive in nature and can be dealt according to the specific procedures. But the non-programmed decision arise because of unstructured problem, and there is no standard procedure for handling such problems. I like to tell a certain incident. If an employee absent himself from his work for a long time without any intimation, what will you do? Being a supervisor, you need not even refer this matter to your executive chief. You yourself can deal with such an employee according to the standard procedures, and you can include charge sheet, suspension, etc. In case a large number of employees absent themselves from the work without any intimation, then that problem has to be considered as unstructured, and now you have to take the chief executive's decision using scientific analysis of the situational factors. There has to be adequate probing and analysis of various alternatives before taking such decision. The fifth type of decision making is individual and group decision. When a decision is taken by an individual in the organization, it is known as individual decision. This kind of practice is in small food service organization where autocratic style of management prevails. Group or collective decisions refer to the decision which can be taken by the group of organizational members such as board members, board of directors, or a committee. The sixth type is crisis and research decisions. Crisis decisions are those which are made to meet unanticipated situations and have to be made instantly under pressure of circumstances in the food service organization. The crisis decision does not allow much scope for extensive investigation and analysis of the factors that is relevant to them. As against this, the research decisions are those which are made after thorough analysis of pros and cons without pressure. The seventh and the last type of decision is problem and opportunity decisions. Problem decisions are concerned with resolving problem situations which have arisen as anticipated or even otherwise. On the other hand, opportunity decisions have been there for increased profits, growth, etc. The frequency of opportunity decision will depend on how far managers is prepared to take the risk and his skill for recognition of an opportunity. Let us now move on to the steps in rational decision making. A rational decision in food service industry have to be taken following the 8 steps based on scientific processes. The decisions can be justified on a logical basis and it does not suffer from any personal bias of the decision maker. What are these 8 stages that has been formulated based on the scientific processes? The first and premost one is diagnosing and defining the problem. The second is analyzing the problem. Third is collection of data. Fourth is developing the alternatives. And the fifth is reviewing the key factors. Sixth is selecting the best alternative. Seventh is putting the decision into practice. And finally, the follow-up. Let me go in detail with each and every scientific stages of decision making. As I said, the first is diagnosing and defining the problem. The problem in any functional areas of food service establishments, when well defined and understood by the manager, it is half solved to a large extent. Wrong decisions are made because the person making the decision does not have a good grasp of the problem. Too often, what managers consider as problems are really a symptoms of problem. For example, in a restaurant, if there is loss of money, it is a problem that cannot be stated as how can we stop losing money, because this is only a symptom. The real problem is to identify what practices in the restaurants are causing the loss. Are the prices too low or expense too high? Identify it. Therefore, it is essential for the decision maker to find and define the problem before he takes any decision. Remember, it is not easy to define the problem too. You need to take sufficient time and should understand the underlying factor or the things that cause the problem and that needs correction. Otherwise, being a manager, you might give answer for a wrong question rather than for the main problem. Always, a clear recognition of problem alone will give right answer for the right question. The second important stage is analyzing the problem. When you have clearly recognized the problem, the next step of decision making is analyzing the problem, which involves classifying the problem and gathering information. Classification is necessary in order to know who should take the decision and who should be consulted in taking it. The effectiveness of the decision may be jeopardized without proper classification. The problem should be classified keeping in view the nature of the decision, whether it can be strategic or routine, the impact of the decision on the other functions of the management, the futurity of the decision, the periodicity of the decision, as well the limiting and strategic factor relevant to the decision. The next step in decision making is collection of data. To classify any problem, a lot of information is required. The problem could be misleading and might have adverse impact on the quality of decision as long as the required information is not available. Trying to analyze without fact is like guessing directions at a crossing without reading the highway signboard. Thus, collection of right type of information is very important in decision making. It would not be an exaggeration to say that decision is as good as the information on which it is based. Managers need to take correct decision during collection of facts and figures also. He should decide the way in which he is going to collect the information and also should calculate the time and money needed in the collection process. He should also gather fact so as to analyze the problem. he must also know the several alternatives from the problem, because after collection of the information, the manager must know how to use it. Remember, it is not always possible to get all the information that is needed for defining and classifying the problems. In such cases, you being a manager or any type of decision maker has to judge how much risk the decision involves, as well as the degree of precision and rigidity that the proposed course of action can afford. Remember, it should always be solution oriented. The manager must now lay down the various alternatives first and then proceed to collect the fact so that it helps him in comparing the alternatives. After defining and analyzing the problem, the fifth step is development of alternative courses of action. A manager is likely to be guided by his limited imagination without restoring to the process of developing alternatives. Each and every problem has many alternative solutions. A manager should understand that and should not think that there is only one way of doing a thing. In such case, it is deliberate that the manager has not probably done to force himself to consider other alternatives. Unless he does so, he cannot reach the decision which is the best possible. From this, he can be derived a key planning principle which may be termed as principle of alternative. Effective planning involves a search for the alternative towards a desired goal. Development of alternatives is no guarantee of finding the best possible decision, but it certainly helps in weighing one alternative against other and thus minimizing uncertainties. Next stage is reviewing of the key factors. In this stage, the principle of limiting factor has to be taken care of during the development of alternatives. A limiting factor is one which stands in the way of accomplishing the desired goal, which is a key factor in decision making. If such factors are properly identified, manager can confine his search of alternatives with those that will overcome these limiting factors. Sometimes, taking no action towards a problem may be the best alternative instead of taking certain action, and it is imperative that any food service organization should always consider this. For instance, if there is any unnecessary post in the housekeeping department, the alternative not to fill will be the best one. The ability to develop alternatives is often as important as making a right decision among the alternatives. The development of alternatives, if thorough, will often unearth many choices so that the manager cannot possibly consider all of them. After reviewing the key factors, the next step is selecting the best alternative. A manager has to evaluate all possible alternatives in order to make the final choice of the best alternative. Here, there are two ways to evaluate the alternatives. The most common method is through intuition, that is, choosing a solution that seems to be good at that time. This is an inherent danger in the process of decision making because a manager's intuition may be wrong on several occasions. The second way is to choose the best alternative and weigh the consequences of one against those of others. Peter Drucker has laid down 4 criteria in order to weigh the consequences of the various alternatives that has been formulated by the manager for a particular problem. They are risk, economy of effort, situation or timing, limitation of resources. What could be criteria risk? If a manager has to weigh the risk of each course of action against the expected gain, then he would have found all the fact and the risk involved in all the solutions. What matters is the intensity of different types of risk in various solutions. The economy of effort. A best manager is one who can mobilize the resources for achieving results with minimum effort. Decision to be chosen should ensure the maximum possible economy of efforts, money, and time. The third criteria mentioned by Peter Drucker is situation or timing. The choice of a course of action will depend upon the situation prevailing at a particular point of time. If the situation has a great urgency, the preferable course of action is that alarms the organization that something important is happening. If a long and consistent effort is needed, a slow start gathers momentum and the approach may be preferable. Limitation of resources. In choosing among the alternatives, the primary attention must be given to those factors that are limiting or strategic to the decision involved. The search for limiting factors in decision making should never be an ending process. You have to discover the limiting factor that lies at the basis of selection from the alternatives and hence plan and take decision. The seventh stage of decision making is putting the decision into practice. Until you put into practice the choice of an alternative, it is not going to serve any purpose. The manager should be concerned with taking a decision as well as with the implementation. He should try to ensure that systematic steps are taken to implement the decision taken. The main problem which he could face is the resistance by his subordinates who are affected by the decision. In case the manager is unable to overcome this resistance, then the energy and efforts consumed by him will go waste. Thus, to make the decision acceptable, it is necessary for the manager to make the people understand what the decision involves, what is expected from them, and what they should expect from the management. The principle of slow and steady progress should be followed to bring about a change in the behavior of the subordinates. To make the subordinates accept the decision, they should be allowed to participate in the process of decision making at the right time. Thus, the managers will get a good support for implementation too. The final process or the stage in the process of decision making is follow up. Always, it is better to check the results after putting the decision into practice. There are many reasons why the follow up is necessary. If a decision is a good one, then you will know what to do in case you face with a similar problem again. If a decision is a bad one, you will know what not to do the next time. If the decision is bad and one follow up soon enough, correction action may still be possible. Hence, in order to achieve a proper follow up, the management should devise an efficient system of feedback information. This information will be very useful in taking corrective measures and in taking right decision in the future. Certain quantitative techniques have been developed to evaluate the alternatives which facilitate in the decision making process. Some of these techniques are marginal cost analysis, cost benefit analysis, operation research, and linear programming. Let us see one by one. The first is marginal cost analysis. This technique is also known as marginal costing, as additional revenues from additional costs are compared. The profits are maximum at level where marginal revenues and marginal costs are equal. For instance, in order to find the optimum output of a machine that you are using in the food service organization, you can verify the input against the output until the additional inputs equal the additional output. This would be the point of maximum efficiency of the machine. Thus, the break-even analysis is a modification of this technique which tells the management the point of production where there is no profit or no loss. Next to marginal cost analysis, the other technique is cost benefit analysis. This is a technique of weighing alternatives where the optimum solution cannot conveniently be reduced to monetary terms as in the case of marginal cost analysis. It is used to identify a preferred choice when objectives are far less specific than those expressed by clear quantities as sale, cost, or profit. For example, social objectives may be developed to reduce pollution of air and water which lacks precision. Cost models may be developed to show the cost estimates for each alternatives and its effectiveness. Then, synthesizing these models, combining these results may be made to show the relationship of the cost and the effectiveness for each alternatives. The third technique is operation research. Operation research used in modern business organization has been defined as a scientific method of analysis of decision problem to provide the executive the needed quantity information in making these decisions. Executive decisions used to be taken on the basis of intuition, subjectivity, or past experience even in a big organization. Operation research seeks to replace this process by an analytical, objective, and quantitative basis based on information supplied by the system in operation and possibly disturbing the operation. Next to operation research is linear programming. Linear programming is a technique devised for determining the optimum combination of limited resources to achieve a given objective. It is based on the assumption that there exists a linear relationship between the variables and that the limits of the variations could be ascertained. It is primarily helpful where input data can be quantified and objectives are subject to definite measurement. It is applicable in such problem areas as production, planning, transportation, warehouse location, and utilization of production and warehousing facilities at an overall minimum cost. Linear programming involves maximization or minimization of a linear function of several primary variables known as objective function, which is subject to set of some real or assumed restrictions that is known as constraints. The last technique in the process of decision making is network analysis. Network analysis is used for planning and controlling the project activities. Under this, a project is broken down to small operations which are engaged in a logical cycle followed by a sequence of operations to be performed. A network diagram may be drawn to present the relationship between all the operations involved. The diagram will also reveal the gap in the flow plans. The interdependence of the various activities of the projects and the activity which should be completed before the others will also be initiated. A number of network techniques have been developed, of which PERT, which is the Program Evaluation and Review Technique, and CPM, that is the Critical Pathway Method, have become popular. Hope you have understood this module on decision making. Viewers, as the future managers of the food service organization, you have to take a proper decision for the problem. Any problem might occur in the food service institutions at any time. As I have already said, there are 7 functional departments in any type of food service organization, and R is the only industry which faces the customers directly. So sometimes you might be in need of taking appropriate decision on the spot in front of the customers. Always be alert and practice the habit of taking an appropriate decision, for which you need to understand the tangible and the intangible factors that is available in the process of decision making. Understand the policies and the future plans of the organization before you take a decision. Whenever a problem occurs, first define and identify and understand the problem first. You select different or various alternatives, weigh the consequences of all the alternatives, and put forth a best decision that will suit the present situation. Thus, a good manager is one who takes a decision which will enable the organization and the customers in a good manner.